The Arikara Scouts' account of the Little Bighorn battle. General Custer told them he was setting out on another mission and might need their service again. When he returned, young Hawk wanted to leave the Scouts, but his father urged him to stay. Soon after, Son of the Star got a message from Custer asking for more Scouts. A meeting was called at Son of the Star's home, and many came. He said, "My sons, a white man has written to me, asking for volunteers to scout." He explained they would ride under Longhair, Custer, which was no surprise as they already knew of his plans for another campaign. Son of the Star had visited Washington before. His words carried weight, and all that needed to be said was, "I'll go." Young Hawk's father declared, "I'll go, and so will my son." Those who agreed to join that day and later signed up were Bobtailed Bull, Stabbed, Charging Bull, Horns in Front, Young Hawk, Bull in the Water, Little Brave, Bloody Knife, Tall Bear, High Bear, One Feather, Running Wolf, Red Star, Strikes Two, Howling Wolf, White Eagle, Crooked Horn, Scabby Wolf, Pretty Face, Curly Head, Black Fox, and One Horn. Some had already re-enlisted at Fort Lincoln and were on duty. Crooked Horn asked Red Bear to stay behind so they could travel back to the fort together, and Red Bear agreed. Fred Girard took them to the commander's office to submit Red Bear's papers. After a short wait, he told them they would enlist, receive uniforms, and be armed. Once the medical check was done, Girard brought them to Custer's office, where they met Tom Custer, the one with the scarred face. Tom raised his hand, and Girard signaled the scouts to do the same. Soon after, Custer entered and relayed through Girard that they were the final scouts to join. Since the expedition was prepared to move, they had to stay on duty at Fort Lincoln. Soldier and Bobtailed Bull met Custer in his riverside camp tent with Girard translating. Custer said, "Bobtailed Bull here is a good man with a strong spirit. I'm glad he's with us. I'm pleased he enlisted. This journey will be hard, but we'll share the hardships alike. I'm proud to have him in my command. I said as much in Washington. We'll fight side by side, like brothers. The great-grandfather has a design. The Sioux camps have united, and you and I must work together for the Great Father, standing as one. The Great Father is glad it took little effort for Son of the Star to send scouts for our task. He's also grateful for Son of the Star's help in carrying out the Great Father's will. For my part, I'll give all I have, and you must do the same. Listen, my brothers, if any of Son of the Star's men fall, their sacrifice won't go unnoticed. Though their kin will mourn, the U.S. government will provide comfort in compensation." Bobtailed Bull replied, "That's good, brother. My children and family will have my pay and rewards. I'm glad you say this. It means even death brings some gain." Custer then said, "Enough talk. Bobtailed Bull will lead the scouts, and Soldier will be his second." At dawn the bugle sounded, breaking camp, and the march began. The troops formed ranks toward the fort. Girard told the scouts they'd have their own unit, and they were the first to parade on the grounds. After the parade, the march started, with Custer at the front. 4 Dakota scouts from Fort Lincoln joined the Arikara, Karu, Matoksha, Makpeyaska, White Cloud, and Buffalo Ancestor. The first camp was pitched along both sides of the Heart River. Cattle were driven along to feed the soldiers. They were seen on the first day's march. The white troops got paid at this camp, but the scouts received nothing, having just enlisted. 2 Arikara scouts, Stabbed and Goose, rode ahead with a message for the camp across the river. Crow scouts were on the far side, and their interpreter, Mitch Boyer, the man in the calfskin vest, crossed to brief them. When Custer's column reached Camp 20, Red Star watched the army advancing along the Yellowstone from the opposite bank. Stabbed and Goose returned to Custer's camp and reported. Camp 20 housed the infantry, the band, all wagons, and some mules. Here, the scouts and cavalry's horses were inspected. They struck camp and resumed their march, the band playing without pause. Custer and Bloody Knife rode past, and Bloody Knife relayed, The general says we are all moving forward. This land is full of enemies. If we strike their camp and are driven back, we must scatter in small bands. You scouts mustn't flee or desert. You cannot return home." The next order clarified that if the command fragmented into smaller groups or lone riders, this camp would be the rallying point for all who became separated. I was glad to hear the band's music carry as far as it did. They were bringing cannons with them. The column reached the Tongue River's mouth, where they made camp. They climbed a hill overlooking the Elk River, then descended back to the Tongue River's mouth. There they found an abandoned Dakota camp and the skeletal remains of a soldier surrounded by clubs and sticks as if he had been beaten to death. Only bones were left. Custer paused for a long while, staring at the soldier's remains. Nearby stood a burial scaffold with black and red upright poles marking the grave of a warrior. Custer ordered it taken apart and told Isaiah Dorman, a black man, to strip the wrappings from the body. When they turned the corpse, they saw a partly healed wound below the right shoulder. The scaffold also held small rawhide pouches containing horn spoons and unfinished moccasins. Isaiah threw the body into the river, and later, when he fished there, some suspected he had used it as bait. They camped there overnight, then crossed the Tongue River, traversed the Badlands, and set up at the Rosebud's mouth. A steamboat waited there, ferrying cannons across the Yellowstone. The main force stayed while the scouts rode upriver. 2 days later, the scouts returned, reporting heavy Dakota trails on both sides of the Rosebud. Across the Yellowstone stood another camp, and from it came 6 Crow Scouts with their interpreter. They broke camp and moved up the Rosebud. Howling Wolf, Running Wolf, and Curly Head were sent back from this point with mail for the base camp. Here, mules were issued for supplies. The scouts received 5 for their provisions. Gerard told them to sing their death songs, sensing battle was near due to the fresh Dakota trail. Custer, who understood Indian ways, often encouraged such rites. Mounted, they circled, chanting their songs. Afterward, they fell in behind Custer and marched until ordered to halt. He then split the scouts into 2 groups, sending one along each side of the river. The next morning at breakfast, Bloody Knife appeared, leading a horse. He had spent the whole night outside. The bugle sounded, and they readied their horses. Custer led, with the scouts flanking the marching troops. Bobtailed Bull took command, with Strikes 2 and others beside him. By nightfall, they reached another abandoned Dakota camp where signs of a Sundance Circle remained. The smooth sand and drawn figures showed the Dakotas had held medicine rites. Dakota scouts with Custer's army said this meant the enemy knew they were coming. Inside a sweat lodge, Red Bear, Red Star, and Soldier saw a long sand mound with figures on it. Custer's men on one side, Dakota's on the other, and dead men between them, their heads turned toward the Dakotas. The Arikara took this as a sign of strong Dakota medicine, foretelling Custer's defeat. As they marched the Rosebud's right bank, they noticed Dakota carvings on the sandstone hills to their left. One showed 2 buffalo locked in combat, which the Arikara debated the meaning of. At another campsite, Young Hawk spotted 3 red-painted stones by a sweat lodge entrance, a Dakota sign that the Great Spirit had given them victory. If the whites didn't come, they would hunt them down. Soldier saw offerings, 4 upright sticks wrapped in buffalo calfskin with cloth and other valuables, proof of a major ceremony. Strikes 2, Little Sioux, and Boy Chief agreed. To the Arikara, this meant the Dakotas were sure of winning. Later, Soldier heard Sitting Bull had held rituals there. Past the buffalo carving, they reached the Rosebud's fork, near where the Cheyennes now live. The 6 Crow Scouts and their interpreter, returning from reconnaissance, rejoined them here. They reported many deserted Dakota camps along the Rosebud. The whole army stopped there, eating lunch on a hill. As the scouts ate, Custer arrived at their camp with his flag-bearing orderly. The Arikara sat in a half-circle, stabbed to Red Bear's right. Custer knelt on one knee and asked, "What do you make of the Crow Scouts' report? They say the Sioux camps are vast. How do you think this will end?" The other officers gathered around the fire, standing nearby. Through Gerard's translation, Custer repeated, "My only aim in fighting these people is to draw them into battle and capture Sioux horses." Custer spread his arms wide, showing his joy at seeing familiar faces on this campaign. "Among you are men I recognize from previous journeys, faces I've seen once or twice before, and it gladdens me to ride together again. If we return victorious," he continued, "Bloody Knife, Bobtailed Bull, Soldier, Strikes Two, and Stabbed shall proudly lead the bravest warriors in parade. When Chief Son of the Star sees his warriors marching, his heart will swell with pride." Turning to Gerard, Custer added, "Tell these young men that if we succeed, my brother Bloody Knife and I will represent them in Washington, perhaps even bring some of them there ourselves." The bugle call rang out, and they advanced with Bobtailed Bull at the front. They came upon another abandoned Dakota camp, this one sprawling nearly half a mile across. Rain had fallen here recently. The disturbed sod around empty lodge circles showed where runoff had been channeled. In the distance, about 12 miles off, they could make out the rise later called Custer's Last Look. They pushed toward these hills, planning to stop briefly for supper before marching through the night. This temporary camp straddled both banks of the Rosebud, and darkness fell completely after their meal. From across the river, Crooked Horn called out to Strikes the Lodge, Saddle Up, Red Star, Red Foolish Bear, Black Fox, and Bull. Forked Horn led this group forward, and here Red Bear learned Bobtailed Bull had ridden ahead at noon. Thus began their night march, riding continuously until dawn. At daybreak they reached the breakfast halt, weary from the journey. As they dismounted to rest, Bull in the water and Red Bear unpacked a mule. "Let's eat well," Bull suggested, "for if we ride to the spirit world today, we should go with full stomachs." Fetching water required passing through the soldiers' camp, where exhausted men lay snoring in scattered groups where they'd dropped. The column reformed, horses moved out, and the army paused on a hill where Custer joined them. His orders were clear: ride ahead quickly and capture the Dakota horses. Stabbed rode through the ranks on horseback, rallying the younger warriors. "Be brave today, men, not children," he urged. "This will be a hard fight. We know a great Sioux village lies ahead. Remember how we fear a wounded buffalo bull, though he carries no bullets to harm us." Knowing many were untested in battle, he sought to prepare them. Standing apart, he rubbed sacred clay between his hands as he prayed. "Father, today I remember your promises. I speak for my young warriors." Then he called the men forward one by one, having them lift their shirts so he could apply powerful medicine to their bodies. Spitting on the clay, he rubbed it on each man's chest, clay he'd brought specifically for this purpose. The supply train remained behind under Pretty Face's watch, and as the sun bled crimson over the hills, the wind carried whispers none could yet understand, whispers of what would come to be known as Custer's Last Stand. The clay still fresh on their chests, the scouts rode forward, not knowing they were the last witnesses to a legend about to be born. Some say the spirits of the Dakota, the Arikara, and the fallen soldier from the scaffold still walk that land, waiting to tell the true story. The battle would be written in history. But the truth? The truth rides in the silence between these words. Who really saw what happened that day, and what secrets did the Rosebud keep? The answers lie where the last echoes of the bugle faded, if you dare to listen. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, and share.